us to the outer limits of the bands and into the clandestine world of the number stations in Tracking the Lincolnshire Poacher.
39715. 39715.
You are about to enter a very strange world.
Yankee, Hotel.
A world of alleged spooks and spies, of conspiracies and covert operations, of illicit transmissions across the globe, of secret agents on undercover operations. Or perhaps just a world of fantasy, in the grip of a Cold War hangover, imagining it all just to fulfill their big brotherly paranoia. Either way, what I'm about to show you is at the very least curious and possibly very scary indeed. Ever since the height of the Cold War, radio enthusiasts across the globe started to notice strange, beguiling broadcasts on the outer limits of the band, anonymous transmissions that all had a similar shape to them. Each had a call sign, followed by sets and sets of numbers, usually in groups of 5. They are read aloud in disembodied, simulated voices, in languages ranging from English and Spanish to Czech and Chinese. Hour on hour, day after day, some so regular you could set your watch by them. They transmitted what people believed was code information and became known to shortwave radio enthusiasts as the number station.
2251.
They gave them suitably elliptical names: the Russian Man, Bulgarian Betty, Swedish Rhapsody, the English Lady, and the Lincolnshire Poacher. And they're still on the air today in their hundreds. One man in particular became obsessed by them, Joaquin Fernandez. And several years ago he started to record, collect and archive them in what he called the Comet Project.
Number stations are believed to be the encrypted transmissions of secret services like MI5, CIA, Mossad to the agents in the field.
Have you ever even got close to understanding what you're listening to?
No, nobody's been able to decode a number station as far as I know.
Have there emerged patterns in terms of the shape in which they're broadcast and the different categories? And is there a very obvious picture? They all have kind of family resemblances in each of the categories.
Absolutely right. They are the ones that transmit with a voice.
0000115.
There's the ones that transmit in Morse. And there are other types that transmit some kind of noise or bleep.
And is there a schedule? I mean, a sort of number station's radio time?
Some of them do work on a schedule, a very rigid schedule. In fact, so rigid you could set your watch to it. Others don't appear to have a schedule. They appear seemingly randomly. And the only reason why we have any schedule at all is because people are very studiously monitoring these stations and then making detailed logs.
People like you, for example.
It was almost therapeutic. It was something that I had to get out of my system. I was spending hours and hours in front of the radio making these recordings, and putting this together and putting it out in the public has more or less cured me, I think.
Joaquin Fernandez is not alone in his fascination with the number stations. Shortwave sleuth Simon Mason discovered them as a teenager and has been riveted by them ever since.
I was fascinated by the noises and the different stations and all the different weird sounds that came out of it. And gradually I began to make sense of it. There were broadcast stations like the BBC World Service and Voice of America in one section. And then there was another section that immediately held all the shipping traffic. And then somewhere in between there were these strange stations playing weird melodies and bizarre Bavarian ear colour music, followed by these people reading out particular numbers.
And this was, what date are we talking about?
We were talking about the early 70s. And what was even more notable about these is that nobody knew what they were. You'd read books, there was nothing in books. You could ask anybody you liked and no one knew anything about them.
Curious, huh? I'm curious. Even though no one seems to know exactly when number stations began, they didn't just start bleeping out of nowhere. The use of shortwave radio in espionage, a low-tech but effective means of transmitting coded data, is in a great John Buchan's 39 Steps tradition, which dates back at least to the Second World War. This was a time when radio transmissions could be decoded and deciphered to convey amazing information about the enemy, as signals expert and cryptographer Owen Lewis told me.
If you go back, for example, to World War II, I seem to remember that the BBC stopped broadcasting Big Ben live. And they took a recording of Big Ben at each hour, and they simply played the recording. They never ever did it live. And the reason for that was to stop the Germans extracting meteorological information from the sound of Big Ben.
What you're saying is you can extract information from anything. Is that your point?
You can extract information of some sort. You get a big bell being struck. The amount of water, for example, in the air at that moment will affect the way that it sounds and the amount of echo that you get. The clouds may affect it.
Christine Large is the trust director at the home of the Enigma Codebreakers Bletchley Park.
People have been trying to keep information and messages secret for just about as long as recorded history goes back, at least to the Egyptians and to the Greeks. And there were some very basic methods. One of them was shaving a messenger's head, writing a message, letting the hair grow back and sending off the messenger to deliver it. In the Second World War, a very good example of the work that was done here at Bletchley Park is that in connection with Abwehr Enigma and breaking that particular system. And amateur radio listeners were used. The operation that they had was eventually known as the Radio Security Service, the RSS, and it had headquarters in Wormwood Scrubs, as it happened. But these amateur listeners intercepted traffic that had messages which were destined for Hitler and his generals. And the information that they gained from that enabled us to arrest incoming German spies.
All around the globe, number stations are still very much on the air. Finding them isn't difficult either. You just need a radio and an open sky, or in this case, a back alley in Kensal Rise and Simon Mason. You normally have to come to an alleyway in the back of somewhere like Kensal Rise in order to try and do this surreptitiously.
No, I'm usually in conservatory in East Yorkshire.
What, the bottom of your garden?
Yes, that's right, yes. I've got a long wire in the back of the garden that boosts the signal.
The radio here is saying that it's 13:59, so obviously we're waiting for 1400, which is 2 o'clock in English, because it happens on the hour. You've just got a perfectly ordinary radio here.
It's an old band radio from long wave right up to the top of the shortwave band continuously. 4 seconds to go.
Oh,
that was a Lincolnshire poacher.
that's quite bizarre. So we'll get the tune, and then in a moment the numbers will start.
Between 1400 and 1410, it's a 1 5-figure header. That tells you what message it is. And then at 1410, it sends 200 5-figure groups, which is a message prosper.
How do you know that?
I've studied the Lincolnshire poacher for about 16 years. Its habits are always well known. It's always fixed. It always broadcasts at the same times, the same frequencies, always 200 5-figure groups. It does that because it doesn't alert anyone in the world to any events it might relate to. It's always 200 5-figure groups where there's nothing going on or there's all hell going on.
So weird, because you suddenly hear the numbers go. You suddenly hear this strange voice. Is that a woman or a man? I can't...
0, 6, 3.
It's a synthesized female voice. It's not a real person. It's just a voice computer.
4, 7, 5.
There have been cases where real people have been reading numbers out, but most of them now use automated numbers. This is all pure conjecture, of course, because the people behind this station don't broadcast that they're the perpetrators. No one has ever come out on the number station world and admitted to being the sender of a broadcast.
Well, there it is, the Lincolnshire Poacher live. But the question is, who's actually doing this? Who's behind the mysterious Spanish lady, the Swedish Rhapsody, the terrifying gongs, and our man, the Lincolnshire Poacher. These stations that both Akin Fernandez and Simon Mason have spent hours listening to.
Whoever designed the Lincolnshire Poacher, they certainly have a sense of humour. They've made the voice a British voice. It has different intonation at the end of every single group of 5 numbers.
4, 7, 5.
And they've picked this folk tune as basically its theme song. It's quirky, it's illogical, it's irrational, and I want to find out who's behind it.
The Swedish Rhapsody was made famous by Mantovani, played on a music box, followed by a very young-sounding German female, which sent out 5 bigger groups after the Swedish Rhapsody tune finished.
The girl would play Achtung, and then she would play Gruppe, Neuen, and then she would go into the groups, spieling them out until they were finished. The Spanish Lady is another number station, and we can infer that there's a lady, but there's a female voice, and she's speaking in Spanish. It's the station that comes out of Cuba, I think.
The gongs were the most sinister of the number stations. The gongs would literally send a shiver down your spine. It started off with some sort of church gongs, but they seemed to be recorded on an old reel-to-reel tape that stretched over years. So the amount of wow on the tape made the gong sound really weird. This is an old East German Stasi station that used to come on the air every evening.
I couldn't help wondering if the whole thing might still be one huge radio prank, the audio daubings of some mad pirate DJ. A hoax. Aliens from outer space?
You buy a shortwave radio, and you go and tune it any time of the day or night, you can find number stations. Now, if this was some kind of performance artist, it's first of all somebody who has a lot of money, and he's been doing it for 30 years in a bewildering variety of forms. Secondly, he's got to be one of the biggest radio pirates in the history of radio, because these transmissions are unlicensed, and he's been violating laws all over the world. I mean, that is not satisfying for anybody who wants a reasonable explanation.
Richard Norton Taylor, who's written about the security services in The Guardian for years, argues that the post-war history of spookdom might lend credibility to the theory that number stations really are secret spy transmissions.
All the evidence is in past cases during the Second World War and afterwards, the beginning of the Cold War really, in the 40s and early 50s, that a number of spies caught in Britain were found to have shortwave radios on them. Communication were basically used for guidance, for instructions, for warnings, for discussing movements maybe. It can actually give real intelligence a sense of movements of, say, an enemy troops. It's probably good, you know, on Earth the messages are, but there's a simplicity of it, and everyone can hear it if they want to, but it's destined for one listener, and only one listener can understand it.
This view is generally shared by the former MI5 operative, David Shaler.
Well, if you've got agents in the field, you would want to give those agents instructions.
The curious thing is about it, it's quite secure, isn't it?
Well, this is it. I mean, you've only got to look at Hello, for example, to see the benefit of using a shortwave radio and a code. And obviously I had the code book in that. I say it's absolutely simple. It can be done in many, many different ways. I mean, one of the best and simplest codes to use is if you both have the same edition of a book, for example. And you can then take words out of that book by communicating by what page it's on, what line it's on, what stage it is in the line of the book. And of course, make it even more complicated. It wouldn't be as simple as that. It would be, say, 2 added to the page number, 1 taken away from the line, 6 added to the word number on the line, or whatever. And those codes are impossible to break. I mean, despite all this modern technology and so on, these really are the simplest ways to communicate. And they have none of the comeback that we have now. I mean, for example, email traffic, mobile phone traffic, all telephone traffic. You can build up a picture of people's contacts, even if you don't know what they're saying. Is you can build up patterns of activity and so on from those kind of records. Whereas this, of course, has none of that comeback because nobody's actually receiving a telephone call. All they're doing is putting a radio on and listening to stuff that's out there in the ether.